Thank you for joining us for the Food Safety for Grilling workshop in connection with the Montague County Youth Fair Leadership Day Youth Grilling Competition. My name is Melanie Stott. I am the Family and Community Health Agent with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. We'll be going over just a few tips for food safety to help with that grilling competition to make sure that everyone ends up healthy, happy, and ready to continue the week. Just a couple of quick disclosures and or warnings. This is not a food handlers class. The food handlers class is a 2-hour class that provides participants ultimately with a food handlers card where they can work in a food establishment. This is a workshop on food safety. We'll be covering just some very basic things, and there is a Google quiz that you need to take and complete to be counted as eligible for the youth barbecue contest. So this is not a food handlers class. This is a workshop on food safety. So let's get started. Why is food safety so important? Well, the CDC estimates that every year 1 in 6 Americans are going to get sick from a foodborne illness. That would be roughly about 48 million illnesses, and this is just an estimate. These are the people that actually report their illness. So we are very concerned about our lovely participants making sure that they do everything they can to not get anybody sick. With that in mind, we are going to cover some 4 simple steps for food safety and to fight back, that BAC standing for bacteria. Our 4 simple steps for food safety that we're going to go over are clean, separate, cook, and chill. These are the 4 basic things we cover in the food and nutrition workshop with 4-H. And so they're very basic and ready to go for fighting bacteria. If we follow those 4 simple steps for food safety, we should be able to negate a lot of opportunity for bacterial growth and foodborne illness. So clean, separate, cook, and chill. And the idea is to keep food out of the temperature danger zone. Now, I'm sure you're asking, what is the temperature danger zone? The temperature danger zone is logistically 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 135 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the temperature at which bacteria grows rapidly, most rapidly between 70 and 125. But we don't want a lot of bacteria to grow, and so we try to keep food out of the temperature danger zone. Once again, that's 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 135 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm sure you might see how cooking and chilling something would be keeping it out of the temperature danger zone. We're also going to talk about the first steps of cleaning. Now, washing your hands is the #1 way to fight that bacteria, to fight against foodborne illness. So washing your hands, the entire process should take about 20 seconds, but it is a process. You need to wet your hands and forearms with warm running water, apply soap and lather, rub vigorously for 10 to 15 seconds. You need to scrub between your fingers and under your nails, and then you're going to rinse that soap off with warm running water. You can dry your hands using a paper towel, a hot air system, or a continuous towel system. Please do not dry your hands on a dish towel, your clothes, or your apron, especially in competition when we're outside and you're possibly using raw meat. So washing your hands, please remember, this is the #1 way you can prevent someone from getting sick from your cooking. Now, when should you dry your hands? There is no consecutive set list of when you should dry your hands. Some basic ones would be before you start working with food, before you put gloves on, or before you're handling or touching raw food. Other times after you've handled raw food, after you've used the restroom, if you cough or sneeze, if you're touching body parts or clothes, if you're going to eat or drink something, if you're going to clean dirty dishes or handle money or your cell phone. Basically, if you touch anything, after that you need to wash your hands. We don't want your hands to be a carrier of disease or bacteria. Other ways you may also try to help keep things clean is by wearing gloves. Gloves are not a substitute for washing your hands, but you can wear gloves to help not transfer bacteria. So you wash your hands and dry your hands, and then you put gloves on. These should fit properly, and you should not put them close to your mouth. Once you've used them for one task, or if they've been damaged or soiled, you need to change your gloves. You could also use tools like spoons or spatulas or tongs or wax paper to help avoid bare hand contact, to make sure you're not passing germs from your hands to a food surface. Another thing you should remember, especially with a competition outside, is prior to actually preparing the food and coming there, make sure your equipment is clean and sanitized. You want to use hot soapy water. These would be your knives, your cutting boards, bowls, spoons, anything like that. They should be cleaned beforehand and ideally sanitized. Working table areas and things like that should also be cleaned and sanitized. So making sure that you have enough equipment, or that you have the option to clean, especially between foods as you are grilling. Make sure that you clean and sanitize your equipment, or at least wash it really good prior to coming. I would like to add a caveat that as I use the word sanitize, sanitizer and things like that are another option similar to gloves. They're a good backup, but you need to make sure that you are washing your hands. This isn't a time to go easy on that. So sanitizer is a backup solution. It is not a first step. So please make sure that you are starting off, or if something happens, you are washing your hands for the competition or during the process of cooking any food. As we move beyond cleaning to separate, step 2 is separate. So let's talk about cross-contamination. By definition, cross-contamination is the transfer of pathogens or bacteria from one food or surface to another. So this could be from a cutting board to a food. It could be from one food to another. It could be from a knife to a food. So we want to try and negate, or at least limit, the opportunity for cross-contamination. And our big way to do that is to separate. And when I mean separate, I mean we need to separate. We separate different types of meat, poultry, seafood, fish from each other and from other foods. You want to store them separate. You want to separate them on the cutting board or with what products you're using. So if I'm going to do a steak or ground beef and onions, I want to cut up my steak on one cutting board and cut up my onions or other vegetables on another cutting board. Just like if I'm cutting up pieces of chicken or cutting up pieces of beef or pork, I'm going to use separate cutting boards. Ideally, I'm going to use separate products, because that process of separating also provides an opportunity to make sure that no juices are transferring from like chicken to a beef or chicken to a seafood, because there are some really different things that have to happen between those two meats. We also, big one, is never transfer a cooked food onto a previously used plate. You want to make sure that when you are cooking a food and then presenting it, it goes on a separate clean plate, because those juices from the raw food could actually get into your cooked food, and if it's not being cooked again, those bacteria go right back on that food. So there are many ways you can separate things. You could try, once again, separate your raw meat, poultry, seafood, eggs from each other, as well as other foods. You can separate by using the cutting boards differently, by having a couple different cutting boards and keeping your protein products on one thing with your plant-based products on another, or by keeping your poultry separate from your beef or pork. You also never put a cooked product on a previously used plate unless you are going to clean it and sanitize it before you put the food on there. If you have no way of doing that, make sure you have a separate serving plate to share and present your food. This provides a way of limits our cross-contamination. We don't want to cross-contaminate our food after we've cooked it. So we've talked briefly about our cleaning on a preliminary part. We've talked about separating both while cooking or prior to cooking, cooking, and then post-cooking. Now let's talk about cooking. When you are cooking a meat, you want to make sure you are cooking to a safe internal temperature. For large pieces of meat, like roast, steak, or chops, you want to have an internal cooking temperature of that beef, pork, veal, or lamb at 145 degrees Fahrenheit. For ground meats, we want to make sure that it cooks to 155 degrees Fahrenheit. So our ground meats would be like a hamburger. And it would be the ground meats from that beef, pork, veal, and or lamb. Once you get into poultry, everything changes. So you want your poultry to be cooked to at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit. That is all poultry: chicken, turkey, duck, pheasant, dove. You want to cook that to 165 degrees Fahrenheit, and that would be a whole bird, parts of the bird, or ground. There is no difference for poultry. Where the beef or those other meats, the beef, pork, veal, and lamb, if it's a big cut of meat, it's 145 degrees, and if it's ground meat, it's 155 degrees. There is that little bit of a difference. But for poultry, no matter what that poultry is, it is 165 degrees Fahrenheit. And how am I going to check for that internal temperature? I'm going to need a food thermometer or a meat thermometer. This food thermometer should be calibrated prior to you using it. So you want to make sure it actually tells the right temperature, and you're going to measure that temperature by inserting the thermometer probe into the largest portion of the meat. That might be into the side, it might be into the middle. You want that probe to go into the largest portion of the meat, and you want that temperature to hold for 15 seconds, or at least, and for chicken it needs to at least get to that 165. Please note, major notation, color is not a good indicator of doneness. You need to double check that temperature. So please make sure you have a working and calibrated food thermometer as you are planning for what to bring to the grilling activity. Also, something to think about as you are waiting to be judged, please make sure that your food doesn't get too cold. We call this hot holding. This is when you are trying to keep a food hot until it can be eaten. So let's say I get my steak and I'm going to get it up to that temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit for that initial cooking. I get it up there and it holds that temperature for 15 seconds. Well, now I need to keep it warm. And what temperature is that? That would be 135 degrees or higher. That is for hot holding. So as it's on my plate or being ready to be judged, I want to make sure it stays warm. And it's going to stay at that hot holding temperature of at least 135 degrees or higher. Remember, we are keeping food out of the temperature danger zone. And if you can remember the temperature danger zone, it is 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 131 degrees Fahrenheit. We are trying to keep that bacterial growth from going. So we want to make sure that we are keeping our food at a temperature above that. So our hot holding is 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Even if I'm cooking my chicken to 165 degrees Fahrenheit or my hamburgers to 155 or my piece of roast or steak to 145 degrees Fahrenheit, I need to keep it at a hot holding temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's say we've now gone through the whole competition. We've had our grilling, we've gone through our judging. A couple of things need to either happen. We need to either eat all our food or we need to chill it. The idea is we want to get that hot food down to below 40 degrees or below within 2 hours. So we want to make sure that it gets out of that temperature danger zone as quickly as possible because we don't want to grow any more bacteria. It's no fun to eat something after bacteria is grown. So we want to make sure that we're getting down to that below 40 degrees within a couple of hours. You can do that through putting a dish in an ice bath. It could be cut into smaller pieces and put into smaller containers to then be refrigerated. The idea is we want to get that food out of the temperature danger zone. So we've covered some basics, but I want to go back to the idea that step one, we come back down to step one after everything is done and we come back to cleaning. We need to wash all of our equipment, hot soapy water, and wash our surfaces. Make sure that everything gets clean. Grilling has a special process for cleaning that grill, and you need to make sure it's clean so it doesn't cause further issue later, not just for bacteria, but for safety issues as well as the bacterial option. All of your equipment needs to be cleaned so that you can go on to using it all again and feeling safe with it. So final thoughts with our food safety grilling food safety. Grilling can be a lot of fun. We enjoy doing it as people. We like to grill. We like cooked meat. We like all of these options. And we don't want to be the source of someone getting sick. So let's quick review our 4 steps to keeping people safe by avoiding food safety issues. Number 1 is clean. Washing our hands, having clean equipment, everything like that. Number 2 is separate our foods so that we are avoiding cross-contamination. We don't want one food to get bacteria on another food that might then not be cooked so that we don't get sick. Number 3, cooking our food to a good food internal temperature. That's different for each food. So for our large pieces of meat, pork, veal, or lamb would be 145 degrees Fahrenheit. Our ground meats would be 155 degrees Fahrenheit, and our poultry, any kind of poultry, would be 165 degrees Fahrenheit. And we want to make sure it stays warm while it is sitting out to be judged. Then we want to make sure everything gets chilled accordingly. With those 4 steps, we are able to more readily limit foodborne illness in food. And that is our biggest goal in this portion of this workshop. I want to thank you for joining us in this workshop video. Hopefully you feel a little more prepared in grilling safely, and I'm wishing you the best and to have a fun and safe grilling experience at the Montague County Youth Fair Leadership Day Youth Barbecue. Just one quick thing to note, you will need to complete the Google quiz. The link is attached to this video so that you are able to get on the list for as being someone who is eligible to participate in that grilling competition. That your name and a legitimate email address are requested as part of that quiz so that we will have that full list. There are 7 questions on that quiz. If you have issues or questions, please contact Ms. Melanie Stott at the AgriLife Extension Office. I am more than happy to help if you have questions about this workshop video or even the quiz. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you have a great time. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.